Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Logical Nonsense Podcast. Today we have a special guest, Dodge Matthews. Dodge and I recently went on a camp trip together, and at that camp trip, he pulled out a little list for me, and I thought it might be a little interesting to go over this list. Brought some controversy at the camp trip, wouldn't you say, Dodge?
Yeah, I'd say it brought some discussion up for sure.
So I want to go over that just because I feel like lists are always a very controversial item for many people. So this list, and now Dodge, I'll actually let you describe the list, but from what I understand is projections of how QBs will do next year and their rankings based on those projections.
Yeah, it's close to that. So it's like as if they were in the same team. Like, if you're just replacing the quarterback on an average NFL team, where would I rank them? And going into this next season.
Okay, I think I understand. So are you ranking the team along with that quarterback?
No, it's as if like it's a fictional team, and all you're doing is replacing the quarterback going into this next season.
Got it. So with no other assets, nothing, just the quarterback itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I like to do is just bring up, I went over this list before, podcasted a little digging. I definitely think there's some spots I want to bring up. And we're going to start kind of towards the bottom. We'll start with notable players outside of the top 20. The two biggest that I saw that I wanted to bring up to you were Trevor Lawrence and Matthew Stafford. So looks like Trevor Lawrence, is this projected for this next year, going over the stats?
Yeah.
So looks like Trevor Lawrence, you had 64.6 completion rating, 6.8 yards per attempt, and then 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. And then for Matthew Stafford, 65.6% completion rating, 7.1 yards per attempt, and is that 1.7-to-1 interception ranking? Yep. So Stafford was closer to making the top 20 than Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence was ranked 26. Why do you have him so, I guess, low on the list?
Well, between the two of them, right? The touchdown and interception ratio is actually better for Trevor Lawrence than Matt Stafford. But when you look at purely his throwing stats, and that's what a quarterback's doing 90% of the time, especially between these two quarterbacks. I mean, Trevor can run, Matt can't. But Stafford throws the ball farther on average, and he completes more passes on average. So you have someone who's able to throw the ball farther and complete more passes. You know, typically they're going to be considered a better thrower, even if that touchdown to interception ratio is slightly worse.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Trevor does add a running threat that Stafford doesn't. But, you know, through 2 seasons, we really haven't seen Lawrence use his legs like he did at Clemson. So I'm not really sure that's part of the game that they're looking for in Jacksonville as well.
It's a good point. It felt like, and I don't know how much you followed him last year, how closely you followed him, but it felt like the Jaguars as well as Trevor Lawrence started to make a turn towards the end of the season. Did that help sway, I guess? Like, do you think he could end the year better this coming season because of that momentum going into the next season?
I think it definitely helped. Based on these rankings, you know, I would say if he played like he did at the end of the season, he's moving up for sure. But it's really about a whole body of work and going through an entire season like that, which is something at least in the NFL he hasn't done yet. So I really liked him out of college. I thought he has all the talent in the world. You can see it. But it just needs to happen in the NFL before I'm going to decide to move him up
Yeah.
any higher.
Which well, I'll bring up a point later, but I want to make a point on Matthew Stafford. So, with Stafford, he kind of he was I want to say was injured for most of the year, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Um, are you accounting for him digressing with age? Is that why he's so low, or did he just have that bad of a season when he did play?
Well, he's kind of always been a gunslinger
Hmm.
type of quarterback. So his touchdown to interception ratio has never been that elite.
Hmm.
Um, he had that one really good year where the Rams win the Super Bowl, and he's had good years with the Lions. But yeah, I think part of the reason his low rating was a little surprising for a Super Bowl winning quarterback, and even recent Super Bowl winning quarterback, was just that he's not going to necessarily have the arm to be that gunslinger mentality that he's had his entire career. So, I mean, a little bit of disrespect maybe, but we'll see. We'll see.
Um, so so what I'm gonna get into and why it's interesting is because um you have Sam Howell at 17, which I remember brought a lot of controversy at the campground. It also brought a lot of controversy, but the reason why I want to question you on this, Sam Howell's only had one game in the NFL. In that game, he threw for 169 yards, one passing touchdown, one interception, 35 rushing yards, and a touchdown.
Yep.
So,
It was like an average game. I guess I would say I think based on how well he played in college and that being his first game without having any starter status for the entire season or anything like that, I think he'll play better next year. And honestly, it wasn't that bad of a game. Um, he did throw a pick, which is something that maybe I'm a little worried about. One game, one pick is not necessarily the ratio you want to keep, especially in the Commanders' offense.
mhm.
But he liked to push the ball down the field in college and in that one game. Uh, Not a high completion guy, but I could see things going well for him. And I think what's Ron Rivera, I think he's done well with quarterbacks generally there.
So this may be he's got good assets around him. He's got good potential. He played well in college, that kind of thing. Is that kind of just a project? Is this more of your bold prediction than anything?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's definitely bold to put him up there. I was surprised, I guess, how high he was when I compiled the stats. But basically, I mean, in that one game, he played pretty well, especially for a first game,
Mm-hmm.
um, without an off season of being the guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he played really well in college. I mean, he had a lot of hype in college
Mm-hmm.
while he was there. And, I think I could see his college ability transferring.
Yeah. Question for you though. Um, how well do you think ACC quarterbacks have transferred into the NFL?
That's a good question.
The names I can think of that have been successful, and one of the only names, Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, yeah.
Obviously, he's had some um, troubles, I guess is a politically correct term for this. But other notable ACC quarterbacks in the past: Daniel Jones, Duke. Um, we got Mitchell Trubisky with North Carolina, right?
Yeah.
I actually think Louisville ACC,
Yeah. Lamar Jackson. Yep.
Lamar
Yep.
Jackson, Teddy Bridgewater. So there's just a few names. I guess Russell Wilson, ACC. So I'm actually
Well,
proving myself wrong, but
ACC for a
or
little
no,
bit for Russell,
yeah,
because then he
not
moved to
for too
Wisconsin.
long, but
Yeah.
um, overall, not a ton of success with the ACC. Do you think that has any factor in his potential? Do you think he can transfer what he did in college into the NFL?
I think the ACC, I mean, it hasn't been the best conference. Obviously, you have the SEC. It hasn't even been the second best conference in my opinion. I think the Big Ten's been the second best conference um, in recent times, and while Sam Howell was there. But I mean, there was a few years there when you had Jameis Winston, Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, Lamar Jackson, where they did have a good ACC quarterback group coming out into the NFL. And, you know, some of these rankings aren't necessarily, I mean, they're based on the next season, not where I see them potentially rising. And I would expect Trevor Lawrence to continue to rise from his 26 ranking. And then of course, you have Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson, Daniel Jones, all much higher in the rankings. And so I can see North Carolina. They play good teams, and I could definitely see that transferring.
Okay, okay. Um,
They have a good
so
coach up there too,
yeah,
Mac Brown.
yeah. Okay. So now what I think I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go um 20 in. So we're just gonna go by five. So um 20 you got Jacoby Brissett, 19 Dak Prescott, 18 Kyler Murray, 17 Sam Howell, like we were just talking about, 16 Justin Fields, 15 Tua. Um, two biggest surprises to most people here would be Dak and Kyler. Dak, I know your answer to this already, throws too many picks.
Oh yeah.
Turns the ball too often. What's your issue with Kyler?
My issue with Kyler, I mean, it's not even really an issue as much as like there are just good quarterbacks in the league. Um, he doesn't tend to push the ball down the field all that often. And so he uses his legs a lot. It also causes him to get injured. So he needs to learn maybe to take his shots a little more. And I know there's that Hail Mary to D Hop that, sticks in everyone's mind when I say that.
Yeah,
But
more of a D Hop play than a Kyler play, but whatever.
exactly. Exactly. And no, he just needs to do that a little more, take his shots downfield a little more on the regular. Um, he completes a high percentage of his passes, and he's got a good running threat. I was a little surprised that Kyler was low. I mean, people talk about off the field stuff as well with Kyler Murray, which
Yep, Call of Duty.
yeah, exactly, Call of Duty, man. And so, we'll see how Kyler plays this upcoming season. I, without looking at the stats, I would have ranked him higher for sure. Same
Where
thing
we
with, oh,
where would you have put those two had you not looked at the stats that you've compiled?
had I not looked at him, um, and I don't watch a lot of Cowboys games either, which threw me off, but I do watch a decent amount of Cardinals games. I would have ranked him probably around 12,
Yeah,
13, top 15 guys.
yeah,
But, when you hear that Dak Prescott's thrown like, I think it's 23 picks in the last 26 games that he's played,
yeah. That's not a
that's
good
not
number.
that's not a good number, especially for someone who was doing really well and was really efficient earlier in his career. It's
Hmm.
becoming more of a trend rather than a one-off for him.
Yeah, yeah.
The mo-
And I think the question for both of these guys too is how much how many more seasons of, I would say, disappointment, considering how much they're being paid.
Oh yeah.
How many more seasons of disappointment before they decide to move on? I think that's a good question to ask.
Especially
Um,
for Dak.
yeah, especially for Dak because I can't remember his contract exactly, but I want to say it's a decent lump sum.
Oh yeah.
Um,
If I remember right, I mean, he also is the older of the two.
yeah,
And the question becomes, how much longer are you going to depend, or are you going to have your franchise depend on a quarterback that has been, as you describe it, disappointing,
yeah,
right? Especially for the Cowboys, who the Cowboys always, and their fans and their administration always has high expectations every year,
they do.
and they keep falling short every year.
But
He's part of the reason.
I will say with the Cowboys, what we've seen in the past is they often hold on to guys for, I feel like, longer than they should, or for their high expectations. I mean, you look at, for example, like coaches, even Jason Garrett. How long was he with the Cowboys before they let him go? I mean,
Yeah.
not
How
that,
many
not
eight and eight
I
seasons can you
yeah,
take?
exactly. I mean, not. I actually like Tony Romo, so this is kind of a bad example, but
I like Tony
Tony
Romo
Ro-
too.
Tony Romo was on that team forever before they moved to Dak. I mean, he
Hmm.
was the man before for a long time. I want to say like mid 2000s is when he started, and he was up until Dak, which was, what was that, 2016 now, which is weird to say, 2016, 2017, maybe around there.
Seems so recent, but yeah, I guess it has been that long about.
So
No, I agree with you. I like Tony Romo growing up. Not a very clutch guy. That's never been his game.
no, no,
But first 3 quarters, he's always looked good. But you're right, completely right with Jason Garrett. They're stuck in mediocrity. They have been for a long time. And unless Dak shows kind of his youthful um, ability that he did show when he was younger to improvise and just, I mean, he was just throwing the ball better, making better decisions
yeah,
just a few years ago, but it hasn't been recently.
yep. And I think, and this is all speculation too, but that could be a product of him, um, trying to prove to the organization that he's no longer hurt and he wants to show off his arm and that he can be that quarterback to step in. Who knows? Like we're just casual fans, but like maybe in his head he's trying to prove like he's got the arm, he can stay in the pocket, he doesn't need to go out and work with his legs anymore, that kind of thing. But
Yeah,
um
definitely.
so all
My
right,
biggest surprise, do you want to hear my biggest
yeah,
surprise on
let's
this one?
hear your biggest surprise.
Um, Jacoby Brissett, so high
Yeah,
at 20. That was my biggest surprise from this list of 5. I did not expect to rank him so high, but he's been just a consistent quarterback
I was just
throughout
about
his
to say
entire time.
he's very
And
steady and you know what you're getting out of him.
yeah, and I mean he plays good football.
Hmm.
That's just what he does. So
He reminds me a little bit, obviously little different games, but he reminds me a little bit of Teddy B in that sense, where he's just reliable. You know what you're getting out of him. He's not gonna take you to the Super Bowl, but he's also not gonna hurt your team. Yeah.
definitely, definitely. And it's all about expectations, right? So we've been
Yep.
talking about Kyler and Dak, being a disappointment at 18 and 19, while Jacoby is a very surprised good 20, right? Even though
Exactly.
they're right
Exactly.
next to each other, it's all about the
Exactly.
expectation. So
Exactly. I actually like Tua and Justin Fields at 15 and 16. The reason being, I think they have the potential to do a lot better, but I feel like Tua is hard to rank just because I don't know how many more seasons he's got in the league, if I'm being honest. I
that's a
mean,
fair question. That's a fair
it's
question.
not even a joke at this point. Like it's a legitimate question because I feel
It
like
is.
once concussions start rolling in, it's really hard. It's easier to get a concussion.
Right.
So,
We saw that with Wes Welker. I
yeah,
mean,
exactly.
guy consistently got concussions. Uh,
Exactly.
Justin Fields, I mean, he's so high because he adds a running threat that basically no other quarterback besides Lamar Jackson can really do.
Hmm.
Um, and I do think he's got potential to slide up this list. I really liked him when he was at Ohio State.
I did
Uh,
too.
he's
Tough
been a
kid.
little bit disappointing, I think, a little in his passing ability in the NFL.
I agree with that.
But, he's got a chance to step up this year. I know that the Bears have added a few wide receivers to help him out, and they're pretty decent too. So
No, exactly. I think it'll be interesting to see, like you said, with some real assets around him, what he can do with it. Just because we haven't really seen him have, I would say, a true number one receiver. Guys like Jalen Hurts, um, who he gets compared to a lot, much different games in my opinion. But Jalen Hurts came into the league and had Devonta Smith, I believe. And then they just recently added AJ Brown. Now they've got a good core, and he's been blossoming.
and
So
he
we'll
has a
see.
great O line.
No,
you
exactly.
can't
I mean,
you
O
can't
line's
even
O
have.
line's huge too. Okay, moving on into the
And
next part.
Tua plays great when he's healthy. I think that's
Exactly.
when he's
Exactly.
healthy, he plays great. He just needs to make sure not to tuck his chin, obviously,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
don't take large hits.
Yeah. Just go down, buddy.
Yeah.
Um, moving on to the next part of your list, we got Daniel Jones at 14, Jimmy G at 13, Brock Purdy at 12, Deshaun Watson at 11, and Kirk Cousins at 10. I think a lot of people, if they hadn't looked at the stats, would be surprised with Brock Purdy and Jimmy G, even maybe Daniel Jones a little bit. But if you watch their games, again, very consistent quarterbacks who don't really turn the ball over all that much, which is probably why they are so high on this list, would be my guess.
Definitely. I mean, Daniel Jones kind of had a breakout year this past year, passing the ball really, really well, adding a running game that we all kind of could see, but it never really was a consistent theme throughout the season until this past season where you know, he had a lot of yards running the football and added to that Giants running game. And so I think, it'll depend on how he continues to develop, obviously. But as of right now, I think the Giants possibly have found a guy that could be their franchise. And I wouldn't have said that about him a couple of years ago. A couple of years ago, I would have said Daniel Jones was not the guy to replace Eli Manning. But
Yeah.
this past season, you know what? He kind of showed out. And then if you want to talk about Jimmy Garoppolo and Brock Purdy, we can as well. I mean, obviously that has to do with Kyle Shanahan at the 49ers.
Yeah.
Um, but Jimmy's always been this type of player, even previous to Kyle Shanahan, and he's just been good. I mean, people underrate Jimmy G, but he is a guy who's been to NFC championship games,
Mhm.
and he's a quarterback that you can win Super Bowls with, and I believe that. Brock Purdy, for the 1 year is a little surprising, but he played extremely well throughout the year. Um, I remember I got into a Twitter spat with someone over Brock Purdy
Yeah, I
one
remember you
time.
telling me this. Yeah.
There, Iowa State was playing WSU, and this guy was saying that Brock Purdy was going to be this next great quarterback. I was saying you're dumb, and lo and behold, Brock Purdy gets a chance and he plays great. after getting drafted so low. So
kid's a gamer.
Yeah, I think I don't see any reason not to rank Brock Purdy so high. I mean, 12, that's still ranking 11 guys ahead of him. And I'm not sure, based on play of last season, that you could even rank him that low.
I think it'll be interesting to see what the Niners do with Purdy and Trey Lance, because that's been discussion for quite some time now. You know, they got the third pick to get Trey Lance, and then they used their last pick to get Brock Purdy. And right now, I'd be picking Purdy. That's my personal opinion, but
well, that's who I picked too. I mean, Trey Lance is on this list. He's ranked at 21, so
yeah.
he's high up there. I mean, a starter in the league, but Purdy's just played better.
Yeah.
It's just the matter of the fact, you know.
All right. Moving on into the list. So Kirk Cousins broke 10. Lamar Jackson 9, Jared Goff 8, Russell Wilson 7, Aaron Rodgers 6. I think after last year, a lot of people would not put Russell Wilson in the top 10. What are your thoughts on that?
I think a lot of people see one bad season and think that that's the quarterback that we're going to see for the rest of their career. And I think if there's one thing that, and I don't want to necessarily make this comparison, but if we make the comparison to Tom Brady, people thought he was washed at the end of his career at the Patriots.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, he goes into a higher passing offense, which is not necessarily the case for Russell Wilson, but he showed he still has it.
Yeah.
Even if he was passing the ball only as much as he did at the Patriots, just his ratios were better. He was more efficient on the Bucks. This is Tom Brady, and so I think that just because you have one below average season, you have to look at the whole body of work of the career and say, well, Russell Wilson has been a guy who's a top 10 quarterback for his entire career, besides one season, which was his first year at the team. The coach who got fired, supposed to be an offensive mind, obviously was not ready for the challenge of a head coaching position, or made the offense better at the Broncos. The defense is what has been carried the Broncos for so long that they brought an offensive guy over. The offense should have been better.
Yeah.
And they weren't at all. So I think completely justified to fire that Nathaniel Hackett, because it didn't make sense.
I completely agree. You're not gonna, I mean, I'm a Broncos fan, so you're not gonna anger me by saying that. I think Nathaniel Hackett was just not the man for the job, and I think his success in Green Bay as an offensive coordinator is because he was an offensive coordinator and strictly that. I think when you give somebody a bigger plate, I guess sometimes they can't handle it, and he couldn't handle it. And like you said, the Broncos have always been strong defensively, especially in the last, I don't know, 15 years, I would say. They've had some very, very good defenses, and last year I'd say the only thing that got them 5 wins was that defense. They might have had more than 5 wins. I don't know, to be honest with you. I kind of lost track after loss 10. So I think I agree with you. I think Russell Wilson can definitely have a bounce back year. I think he's in a better position than he was in last year, but I think to an extent the pressure is even more on him than it was last year, just because he did have a bad season and people are expecting him to do good, and if he doesn't do good, they're gonna write him off. Because what's worse than one bad season? 2 bad seasons. So,
I completely agree with you. The pressure's all on Russell Wilson. One thing that's not going to alleviate that either is that I think the Broncos receiving core just isn't that great, if I'm being honest.
Yep.
We see a lot of drops. I think also you see receiving cores that are having a little bit of inability to stay healthy,
Mm,
especially. And when you're not healthy and when you are healthy, you have a lot of drops. I think it's hard to say you have a successful receiving core. And we'll see. I think Sean Payton is a lot better, is a huge upgrade for the Broncos as a team.
definitely.
Um,
Even
and
his
yeah,
mindset.
I just think Russell Wilson has been written off already in that way. So I'm not sure. I think he does have the pressure on him, but I think also a lot of people are not expecting much as well.
True.
Um, and in that way, it's possible that he has some pressure off of him.
Yeah,
So, I mean, we'll see. He's in a very tough conference, arguably one of the most tough in the National Football League. Um, so we'll just have to see. But I think he'll have a bounce back year for sure.
definitely. The other guy I want to talk about, Jared Goff, had a great season last year. A lot of people, speaking of writing off guys, a lot of people wrote off Jared Goff, especially Rams fans. Thought he was very mediocre. I mean, after he even brought them to the Super Bowl. And
Yeah, I mean, basically all I have to say about Goff is he's a quarterback that plays consistently well. Um, he was undervalued at the Rams and this came from the fact that the most attention he had was when they went to the Super Bowl and he didn't look good. They didn't look good.
yep,
And so I think a lot of people thought that that's what Jared Goff is. A quarterback who gets helped out by his defense. And at the Lions, I think he's showing nope, it's him and the offense that are helping
yep,
win games now. And yeah, I mean, he's a good quarterback. He's young. That's another good thing for the Lions, who are going to have a good season next year. They just are.
yep. They've got weapons. Their defense continues to improve. I like their coach. Um, yeah, I think Lions are a team to watch out for in the NFC North. Other thing I want to bring up here in this five, well, actually, we can talk about two people here. This once he gets to the top 10, it's hard not to talk about all of them.
Yeah.
Lamar with this big paycheck he got, which personally I don't think is deserved. He's not the best quarterback in the league. He doesn't deserve best quarterback in the league money. Um, can he live up to that paycheck?
I don't know if he can. Um, if he has MVP seasons like he did, completely deserves the paycheck. But and another reason for him getting a large paycheck is that this is just what NFL teams have to do to get a top quarterback nowadays is pay exuberant a lot
Yep.
of money
Yep. Yep.
to get a good quarterback, or they draft well, and a lot of that is luck. It's is he worth the most? No. He shouldn't be paid the most. There are plenty of quarterbacks who are paid less who
Yep.
can get you near the same ability. I'm
Yep.
thinking about, Jimmy Garoppolo on this list is 13. He was less. I'm thinking about Jared Goff in a way was less,
Yep. Yep.
pretty much everyone else, on this list was either drafted or recently, or is Patrick Mahomes as well in that top. I have Sam Howell quite high, which he's not on the same level as Lamar Jackson. That's top 17 versus 9, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but you can win games with Sam Howell. Am I sold that you can win a Super Bowl with Lamar Jackson? I don't know if I
Yeah.
am. I don't
It's a
know if
good
I am.
question. And I agree with you there. I feel like we haven't seen an offseason where he's proved he can not only be a regular season quarterback, but be a playoff quarterback. I think when it comes down to it, we can talk about stats all day, we can talk about rankings all day, but teams ultimately want to win championships. Championships brings in revenue. Championships brings in fans. And so it's ultimately which quarterback can not only lead you in the regular season, but also lead you to that Super Bowl at the end of the year. So
Exactly. And I mean, Lamar Jackson's at 9, but he's moved up past some of these guys who don't have the rushing ability that he has.
exactly.
And that's an added factor for him for sure. But a lot of the job of quarterback is not in football, especially when you get to the postseason and staying healthy. It has to do with throwing the football.
Yep.
So I'm not sure that you can win a Super Bowl with Lamar Jackson. The rest of the top 8, everyone ahead of him, I think you can win a Super Bowl with.
Yep.
I
And I
think
mean,
down below it starts to get questionable. From 9
yeah,
down.
you even look at those top 8 guys, and pretty much all of them have been either one game away from being in the Super Bowl or in the Super Bowl. The only guy I see here in the top 8 that hasn't been technically close is Herbert.
Yep.
But
Herbert's the only one.
the rest of them have been there, you know? So just something to think about with Lamar. Has he even been to a conference championship game yet? Trying to think.
I want to
That
say
MVP
yes,
year, did he?
but I don't watch enough Ravens football, and it's been a while for the Ravens. I know that.
Yep.
And really hasn't shown the ability to pass the ball as well as he did his MVP season.
Yep.
Or as well as he did at Louisville, going back to college days.
Yeah.
His deep ball just hasn't been as great, and he's had weapons. I mean, his tight end is really good, Mark Andrews,
Yep.
and I mean this past
Hollywood
season,
Brown.
yeah, he had Hollywood Brown, and he's gotten more weapons now, right? They got Odell.
Yep.
I want to say they added another receiver.
Yeah, I can't think of who though. I can look it up right now. But yeah, you can keep going.
But anyway, I think Lamar is below the top 8 in my mind, for sure. I think there's
Yeah.
an argument for Cousins that he is a quarterback that you can win a Super Bowl with, while Lamar's not, even though he's lower on this list, because Kirk Cousins is going to be healthy.
Yep.
And that Kirk is going to play well. It's Lamar Jackson's inconsistency as well that also hurts him. And, I just, you think about it, what if you paid a quarterback $20 million and you signed another guy for $20 million? With a decent quarterback.
Yep.
Maybe that does better.
Yep.
Ravens are not on my list to win a Super Bowl next year. And
no, I agree with that. The Ravens drafted Zay Flowers in the draft for Lamar, and then they also picked up Nelson Aguilar. And
okay.
Yeah, I chuckled too at that. They also have Rashad Bateman from last year.
So I mean, they've improved a little bit on their receiving core, but I don't think it's going to be enough to change anything. And I'm not sure that his injuries are going to stop happening.
No, and I also think a part of it is some that will put him on the spotlight, not only the paycheck, but how long I feel like he kind of was in limbo because he wanted that paycheck. Now you got the paycheck, now go play kind of thing. Like can you prove what you've been waiting around for and kind of lingering on your injuries for, that kind of thing. So Aaron Rodgers, how do you think he'll do with the Jets?
I think Aaron is one of the top quarterbacks the NFL's ever seen. He's definitely one of the most efficient quarterbacks the NFL's ever seen. I think he'll be fine on the Jets. I know he had a little bit of a down year at the Packers this past season. Obviously, with the loss of Devontae Adams, that's going to happen to you. But when you're playing with receivers that I didn't know the names of before week 1,
Yeah,
and the only reason I know them now is because they were consistently added and dropped in fantasy leagues.
that's true. Christian
Um,
Watson.
Romeo
Yep.
Dobbs,
Yep.
Alan Lazard. I
Yep.
mean, so he didn't have a great season last year. I think that's partially to receivers. I think that's partially maybe a little bit on him on not being motivated enough or something to that nature. On the Jets, he's got Garrett Wilson,
Yep.
Corey Davis,
Yep.
who I think is a good wide receiver, just needs to stay healthy. And they've got running backs, Brees Hall. I want to say they have another running back that's I think is pretty solid on the Jets.
Yep.
And they've got a good defense. So I think Aaron Rodgers and the Jets are back in the mix for not only winning their division with the Bills and the Dolphins, but possibly going in a deep run at a Super Bowl shot. Aaron
Yep.
Rodgers is one of those quarterbacks
He's
that
been there.
when he's hot, pretty much no one better.
Mm-hmm.
You could argue Patrick Mahomes,
Yep.
but other than that, when Aaron Rodgers is playing well, you'd rather have Aaron Rodgers on your side.
Yeah. And so moving into your top five, I actually like the top five. I think this core is, in my opinion, the top five quarterbacks in the league. You could throw in Rodgers in there. I think he's interchangeable with just about anyone. But I do think that core that you have, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, and Mahomes, are all good. They deserve to be there. I think the only one that I would like to see a little higher is Josh Allen. Um, his stats, I think he's definitely in, and I know why he's so low. He just turns the ball over too much. He's a little too aggressive with the ball, and that is something he needs to work on. He's got an arm, and I know he likes to fling it deep, but um, it's cost him in some games. Turning the ball over, it's definitely cost him some games, but I think there's no doubt that the talent's there. There's no doubt he has some of the best talent in the game right now. I would say top three talent. He has top three talent. He just needs to be able to execute better and efficiency.
Yeah, I agree. He has top 3 talent. The only 2 people I'd put him behind it talent wise is Mahomes and Herbert.
Yep.
I think Allen's a solid number 3 and talent wise there, but he turns the ball over too much. His accuracy has gotten a lot better,
Yep.
especially from his days at college. I watched some of those Wyoming games. He's had similar problems since college of turning the ball over and forcing things. Now he's had such a strong arm in college, you could get away with it,
Yep.
forcing it into a tight zone.
You can't force it in NFL anymore.
No, the defense is too fast. They're too rangy. Ball hawks all over the place, and they read eyes much better in the NFL.
Yep.
So now Allen's really good. He's a top 5 quarterback in this league. Would like to see him to turn over the ball less and continue to rise in those completion percentage numbers as his accuracy continues to get better. And he adds a running threat to
I
that
was gonna
team.
say.
I mean, and he's big, he's durable, he's strong. That's something that's a little bit different than the other quarterbacks around that you see with Lamar Jackson and Justin Fields, is that he really has the size to take
Yep.
those hits.
Yep.
A
He's
little bit
tough.
reminiscent of Ben Roethlisberger in the toughness
Yep.
way. Obviously, a lot more mobile.
Fast. Yep.
Obviously a lot faster
Yeah.
than Big
Not
Ben.
not so many beers as Ben, maybe.
No, but he can lay the woodshed on a DB if he needs to, and that's a little reminiscent.
Yep.
And a little bit of turning the ball over too reminds me a little bit, but
Yep.
of Big Ben. But
Yeah.
no, Big Ben had a successful career in this league. He's got even more talent than Big Ben.
Yeah.
Uh,
His ceiling, I would say, is higher than Big Ben's.
Definitely
He's been close. I mean,
that Chiefs game.
Mahomes had what, 13 seconds? I don't remember how many seconds was left on the clock. You thought that would be over, but he's been
Yeah, I
close,
thought it was
man.
over. No,
He's been close.
he's gonna get one eventually, I think, no doubt. Based on just looking at who has won a Super Bowl on this list, yeah, I think Allen's gonna get one in his career. Um, the team is good, the coach is good,
Yep.
he's good. It's
Yep.
gonna happen for him at some point. Whether that means, whether that means Andy Reid has to leave the Chiefs at some point, or
Yep. Yeah,
or
no, exactly.
Patrick Mahomes, has a down year, or
I
hopefully,
think,
but not, but gets injured or something, or Travis
yeah.
Kelsey's out. That would
Yep.
leave an opening for the Bills to make that run.
I think at this point in his career too, I mean, we were talking about turnovers. That's just that fine tuning, making those little. I mean, like we said, he's got all the talent in the world. He just needs to fine tune those little steps and those little things, and he's there. So going into Justin Herbert, he's still put up great statistics, and I personally don't necessarily love his weapons around him or love his team around him. He's got great. Keenan Allen's very underrated receiver.
And
Um,
Mike Williams too.
Mike Williams too. Um, but they don't really have a great third receiver.
Yeah, it's Austin Eckler, the running back. That's their
Exactly.
third receiver right
And
there.
I think their tight end is Gerald Everett. Is that?
Yeah, it sounds right, but it doesn't matter. That's not
I
it's
mean,
not noteworthy.
yeah, exactly. Which tight ends is a whole another talk because I feel like this league's getting more of a it's more of a luxury if you have a good tight end now. It's crazy how hard it is to find an elite tight end, I should say. So
Well, yeah, I mean, there's Kelsey all by himself, and then there's a good solid core
yep,
of about 5, 6,
yep.
and then the
I would
rest
say
are
I was gonna
all
say
interchangeable.
I think the Chargers can get. I'm not a huge fan of their coach either. They can get a little bit better coaching system, maybe a better defense. I'd like to see what he could do with that Chargers team. Another guy, huge potential, um, all the talent in the world. So,
I think he's possibly the most talented quarterback in the NFL.
yep,
Um, he's got all the throwing talent that Mahomes has, but he can run better, in my
yep,
opinion. Even though his rushing stats are technically less, I feel like they could add that. And just from the eye factor, I mean, he just throws a beautiful ball.
yep,
And he's had that since his days at Oregon.
yep,
He's had it everywhere.
yep,
Um, he's the real deal. He needs to have a better team around him, like we've talked about, to get the Chargers up higher. But he's a quarterback that you can win the Super Bowl with for sure. Just
yep,
a pure passer. Doesn't turn the ball over all that much at all. Can throw it deep, accurate.
yep,
He has all the talent in the world.
yeah. Moving on to Hertz, breakout season last year. I think most people wouldn't have expected. I think a lot of people expected him to elevate because he did have a good second season, but I don't think they expected it to be this big of a jump. I know I got extremely lucky in fantasy because I said I liked what he did towards the end of the year, and I took a chance on him, best chance I could have taken. But there were games where by the third quarter he had a like full game, good game stat line. There was times at halftime he'd go into halftime and he'd already have 100 yards rushing, 150, 200 passing yards, 4 touchdowns. I mean, that what that offense could do was insane with him in it. Granted, I have a sneaking suspicion what you're going to say. That offensive line was special, probably one of the best offensive lines we've seen in the last 10 years. But still, he led them to the Super Bowl, and he was pretty dominant. So
Yeah, I mean, he has to be out of these top 5. He was the largest surprise to me, if I'm being honest. Even going back to last year, as a Jalen Hurts doubter,
yep,
I did not think that he necessarily had the throwing ability to be a Super Bowl winning quarterback.
she's technically right.
Technically, barely.
Yeah, it's a good game.
But he I mean, he's proven me wrong. Even last year, even this year, or 2 years ago and last year, he's proven me wrong, and that's why he's so high up the list. He has a running threat that is, top 5 quarterback running threat in the league for sure. He throws the ball better than I would have expected coming out of college, even at his time at Alabama and then Oklahoma. I mean, that Eagles offense was obviously propped up by their O-line, kind of similar to the Cowboys offense not too long ago when they
Yep,
had that great O-line.
DeMarco Murray.
Exactly. And yeah, I mean, they had a great line at the Cowboys. The only difference is that didn't have as good of a defense as the Eagles had last year.
Yep.
And the Eagles are just a good team. They're going to be right up there again. I fully expect Jalen Hurts to play well again. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.
Yeah.
So, this is his second season where he's proven me wrong, and he just had to move up the list. And he was still a surprise at 3, in my opinion, because I still, talent wise, he's going to move far. I mean, talent. Just looking at his talent, I don't see him as a top 5 quarterback.
Yeah.
Just looking at his talent. I mean, you got Mahomes, Burrow, Herbert, Allen, Rodgers, who I think is more talented.
Yep.
And there's more arguable ones after that. But Hurts has been the top 3 quarterback all last season for sure. Sometimes best.
Yep.
Very efficient.
No, exactly. And looking at that turnover rate that you like to look at, 4.5 touchdowns to 1 interception is a pretty good one.
Yeah.
So,
and of course, we should state that's total touchdowns to total turnovers.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's including rushing touchdowns and including fumbles to your passing touchdowns and your interceptions.
Yep.
But yeah, super efficient.
So moving into number 2, had another good season. He continues to elevate his game, I would say, season by season. And I would say even continue to prove that he belongs in the top quarterback conversation. So yeah, what would you like to comment on Joey?
I'd like to comment that if there was a quarterback other than Patrick Mahomes that I would want to start my team around, and even then, I would choose Joe Burrow.
Yep.
And the reason being is that he throws a beautiful ball. He's just got all the right intangibles. I mean, he's just been playing good football ever since that last season at LSU, which was incredible last season.
Historic.
And exactly. And historic is the right term for sure. And he got injured when he was with the Bengals, came back, played great. I mean,
Yep.
he deserves the number 2 ranking 100%. The only sad thing about Joe Burrow is that he didn't go to Nebraska, supposedly when he wanted to. If you don't know, I'm a Nebraska fan. But yeah, so really great player. The Bengals found a franchise quarterback with that guy.
And he's young too.
And he's young. I mean, he's gonna be a top quarterback for a long, long time.
Yep.
And the Bengals will continue to be a top team because of it for a long, long time.
No, I mean, there's not much to say about him. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. He's got everything you would want in a quarterback, and he's also a gamer. He knows how to win games. Another guy who's been so close numerous occasions. Went to the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Had a close game with Chiefs last year. Yeah. Number one, pretty obvious. Patrick Mahomes. He's been the best quarterback in football for, I don't know, what would you say?
At least a few years now, at least.
Yeah, I would say for the last 3 years. I can probably confidently say probably the last 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, Rodgers, I had that debate
Yep.
when Patrick Mahomes was first coming up there as being a top-rated quarterback. But, I mean, he's just breaking all stats. If you want to talk about historic quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes is one of them. And just everything he does. And he does it every year. I mean, Tyreek Hill left. Didn't matter. They just plugged and replaced with another speedy receiver. And Tyreek Hill had a great year at Miami as well, showing that he's not just a guy that is speedy and plays with Holmes, but he can play with any quarterback.
It was a win-win situation for both of them. They both proved that they're both great players. So, but yeah, I think the question now is how long will he take reign of the NFL? You know, how is this a dynasty? They've won two Super Bowls in the last 4 years.
I mean, this could be a dynasty for sure. I think they are in their heyday. If you're a Chiefs fan, you're living it up right now. And you just don't want to see the right end. I don't think it's gonna end anytime soon as well. They've got a great coach, Andy Reid. They've got the best quarterback in the league. They added another O-lineman. They got the best tight end in the league. Their defense a little sloppy, but they have such a great offense that it doesn't even matter most of the time. So I do think that the Chiefs are here to stay. I think Patrick Mahomes is here to stay. And he might just break every record that a quarterback's ever had by year 10. I mean, who knows?
All right. Well, last questions for you. We're gonna do rapid fire. Who's your Super Bowl winner? Who's your MVP? And who's your offensive rookie of the year for this year?
Well, you're putting me on the spot.
They want you to do your research.
I'm gonna say Super Bowl winners this year. I think it's gonna go back to the NFC, and I'm gonna say that the Eagles are winning it this year. Jalen Hurts gets his first.
MVP
Hurts. gets his
Hurts.
MVP.
Okay.
So we got
Okay.
MVP and Super Bowl going the same. But
Offensive rookie of the year.
offensive rookie in the year. I'll just look at quarterbacks.
Bryce Young, CJ Stroud. Uh, who else they got? Anthony Richardson, who I know you love.
If you don't know, he's ranked 50th on this list.
I would say Hendon Hooker, but he's behind Jared Goff, so it doesn't matter.
Hendon Hooker, I'm high on. If Jared Goff gets injured, he could definitely win Offensive Rookie of the Year. But right now, I'd go Bryce Young. It almost always goes to a quarterback anyway.
Yep.
Although I guess I can name Bijan Robinson. Could easily. He's a very talented guy. I know we talked about it. He might have been the most talented in the draft. And he's going to the Falcons, whose passing game isn't going to be great.
No.
Which doesn't necessarily help him, but it means he's going to get a lot of touches. And he can catch the ball. So I guess, I'll go with Bijan Robinson actually, because out of the rookie quarterbacks, well, they had great seasons in college, generally, although not Anthony Richardson. He did not have a good season in college, and yet somehow was a top pick in the draft. I never loved those. At Zach Wilson. If you don't have a good season in college, why? If you don't have a great season in college, why would you be hyped up as like these top picks? I don't know. No, but I'm not even sure. Bryce Young, I have behind Andy Dalton, right? Andy Dalton's technically, I think they said he's still QB1, but everyone knows by week 1 that's changing. And to be fair, they are close in the rankings on this. Andy Dalton at 28, Bryce Young at 33. One's a rookie, one's near the end of his career.
Yep.
So Bryce Young probably deserves to eventually start. CJ Stroud, I think, is the best quarterback on his team even. He deserves to be QB1 on that team. Just, it's a big transition. We've seen Ohio State quarterbacks, especially from Ohio State, not have great first couple of years.
Yep.
And I'm looking back at Justin Fields, looking back at Dwayne Haskins. Both of them I was really high on. Both of them not great.
First years, yeah.
First or second years, and unfortunately Haskins, passed away.
Yeah.
But I'm high on all their potentials of all the rookie quarterbacks this year, except for Richardson.
Yep.
I think Hendon Hooker, if he finds he's in a difficult spot because Goff is the franchise quarterback and he's getting older. He's not a young guy. But if he finds a spot relatively soon to be the QB1, I think he'll end up being the best quarterback from this draft class.
All right. You've heard it here first, folks. Dodge Matthews for some bold predictions today. Thanks, Dodge, for coming on. I appreciate you. Yeah.
Thank you, Hunter, for having me. It's been a great time.
Sir. Yes, sir. Have a good night, sir.
You too.
Moving on into our next section, today will be our music section, which the Pink Tape by Lil Uzi Vert just dropped, which is a very interesting album to say the least. I'll go more in depth on what I mean by that. But to start off, 26 songs like expected. There were some features that weren't on here. Future, Baby Keem were expected to make appearances and did not. Nicki Minaj and Travis Scott were the most notable. now getting a little bit more into the album, I liked how passionate Lil Uzi Vert sounded throughout the album. I feel like he had this sort of energization. I don't know if that's a word. He was very energized. He sounded like he did before Eternal Take. I think looking at that Eternal Take and his album with Future, you could kind of, I felt like there wasn't a ton of energy like we're used to seeing from him. And so it was good to hear that nostalgic Uzi sound. His album have a lot of influences throughout. You can tell, you can hear in many of his songs a punk rock album influence, which also I would say kind of ties into Cardi, Playboy Cardi, and his influence on music and his sound. Very similar, a lot of nods to some of the most famous punk rock songs, with some of the songs that he had. Even the album kind of reminds you of a punk rock album cover, like the album cover. And so overall, I feel like that influence is very heavy throughout. Another influence I noticed throughout the album is his love for Japan and Asian influence. There are a few songs where he really kind of have Asian ties within the production, as well as different little bits where you can hear some anime and that kind of thing, which is, it's just cool that he's incorporating some of his own interests into his music. I mean, music is a form of self-expression, and so to see him mixing, obviously he's into punk rock, and bringing that into hip-hop is something that we haven't seen a lot of. Like I said, Playboy Cardi is, I would say, the closest thing to what we've seen to this with his album. Oh my god, I'm blanking on it. The Red album. I can't think of what it's called. The Red album though. Too Much Red. Is that what it is, or something like that? You understand what I'm saying? His last album. Yeah. The first song, kind of a nod to the classic. With the girl Uzi, not again, that stuff was very interesting to hear again. The Nicki feature carried that song. She was incredible in that. Her vocals were great. She had a great verse. Again, was cool to see those two match up, because I don't know if I know of another song where they've been paired together. So super, super cool to see that incorporated in there. He also had some melodic songs as well throughout the album. Mama, I'm Sorry. He has a sample to Chief Keef in there. So here's some of my gripes now. I had some highlights of the album that I liked, but some of the gripes I had with the album, a lot of repetitive lyrics, a lot of the same topics he's talking about throughout the album, which, to be like, that's fine. Like, it's an album, you should have a theme or something like that, but he's not necessarily telling a story. He's more so just telling the same story over and over again. With that being said, too, there's not a ton of album cohesiveness. I feel like there's little pods of similar beats. Like I said, there's punk rock songs, I would say, in this album. And then there are go back to like a regular upbeat, like Uzi nostalgia song. And then there's songs like Mama, I'm Sorry, where he's kind of like in his feels, I guess. It's not like the best way to put it, but more melodic, more down, I guess. So I guess emo rap, I guess. Not necessarily emo. Emo is not the right term for it, but I think you understand what I'm trying to say there. So it's very up and down, and I wasn't a huge fan of that. I feel like if you're gonna have an album, it should be somewhat consistent. Obviously, not repetitive, but consistent in the sense that I shouldn't listen. I should listen to one song on an album and be able to identify what album it goes to, because in this album, I could pick song 2 and pick song 13, and they sound completely different and completely from different albums, which I'm not a huge fan of. And so I just not a huge fan of how it goes all over the place. The production on this is crazy, like absolutely insane. I'm not sure who did most of the production on this, but like they did a very good job, especially because there was so much diversity. He executed the sounds Uzi was looking for and how Uzi sounds on those beats extremely well. I think it's the best production album we've seen from Uzi, in my opinion. That could be a hot take, but it's also biased because I'm just now hearing it. But I just feel like the attention to detail in the production is actually quite insane, especially if you have kind of a knack for that. So I rated the production on this 8.6. Album cohesiveness was ranked at a 6 for me. Like I said, kind of all over the place, but there were these little pods where it did feel like an album for a sec. Lyrics were probably a 3 for me, just not super meaningful lyrics for most of them. And then the replayability, I feel like there's enough songs on here to give that a 7. There are some really good songs on here that I think are going to be hits for him. And overall, I feel like the album is a 7. It's above average, but it's about what I expected for a 26-song album. It's very hard to create a 26-song album and not to have skips, and he definitely had skips in this album. So, yeah. Moving on into our last section, the fashion section, I wanted to bring up NIL deals, which I know is probably more of a sports topic. However, I want to take a look at it from a brand perspective. Bronny James, Mikey Williams, Jada Williams are some of the 3 biggest names who are still in high school and already have NIL deals. The reason these ones matter is because they have NIL deals with very big companies. Bronny James with Nike, Mikey Williams with Puma, and then Jada Williams has about a dozen deals. One of them's with Spalding, I want to say, and some others. The reason this is a big deal is because coming from Nike's perspective, to sign somebody in high school, you are now obviously Bronny has a big following, and so I would say Nike's brand carries, their image is that they carry the best athletes in the world. And if you look at who they've signed, that has been true. Some of the best athletes in the world have gone to Nike. Michael Jordan, obviously, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant. The list goes on into other sports as well. I'm not going to go into other sports because this is mostly about basketball. Basketball seems to be the biggest one for NIL deals. For high school, at least I should say. And I think that's what's interesting about it. Bronny James is not established yet. Whether you want to think he is or not, he hasn't proved anything yet. He has only played Sierra Canyon High School basketball, and he plays AAU, he plays against other national kids in the country at those tournaments. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's the true best thing. Like, he's not guaranteed to go in the NBA. For all we know, Bronny could be terrible at USC and not even get drafted. Do I think that's going to happen? No. But I'm just saying it's a very big risk for Nike because for them to have this brand image of we sign the best athletes, you are taking a big risk on a kid who's never even played at a collegiate level, let alone a pro level. And that's a one thing about NIL that is interesting to me is everyone before NIL, their argument if they didn't want NIL was just basically that they're too immature to handle that much more. And to a certain extent, I feel like it's a good point to bring up. But it also, like, it puts a lot more pressure on them. And then if you think about it, coming down the line, the way endorsement deals have been working, like, are these kids going to start getting shoes in college, like their own shoe line in high school? Like, and if that's the case, like, I'm especially not a fan, because by the time they get to the NBA, maybe have a year in their belt, like, they're so focused on money already instead of focusing on their game. And these brands have profited off of them during their short tenure in high school and college. But then they don't get a long-lasting product, which technically these NIL deals are really investments for companies. The better your athlete is doing, the better your company is going to do. The more attention they get by fans, the more likely fans are going to want to purchase his shoes, purchase what he wears. And so I understand that it's an investment, and with investments there are risks. I just feel like the risk is too high in high school. Now, if there's a second or third year player in college, I think it makes more sense. But it's just, right now, I don't know if it makes sense to be paying these guys millions of dollars for when they really haven't proven anything to anyone. So, that's about it for my fashion segment.